Well, I get offended by the use of what I think are computing terms and technology because it's hard enough already, and for people to introduce, and big data is one of those terms, and data scientists is another of those terms. It's like, data science doesn't mean anything. All scientists are data scientists. Say scientists work with data and make logical conclusions from data. So the term data scientist is nonsense. Big data is another nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. So I don't like those terms, but there again, they're amorphous enough that they've gone and attached themselves to things, and we have to talk about those things. So we're stuck with it. Well, there are a number of lines to draw, right? And the first thing is that there's data for people and data for processes. So there are various things that happen within computer systems where one process sends data to another process which causes some kind of action, and the latency in that, the amount of time, it's normally advantageous to have that as low as possible. As soon as you've got people involved, as soon as you're actually presenting data to people, then you're in a different kind of time frame. The fastest an individual can respond is about 1/10 of a second. That's about the time it takes for a fast bowler for the cricket ball to leave his hand to actually reach the bat. People can only just respond at 1/10 of a second. So that's the fastest thing for human being. And after that, you've got lower levels of response when you actually have to think about something. And that's where I see BI, fitting in. It's like you're presenting information to people, and the reason you're presenting it is they're going to act in some way or other. And that's what's really going down. And that's what, if you actually talk about Yellowfin, and you see the way that Yellowfin's built its interface, there's some interesting things about its allowing certain human responses. It's structured in such a way to enable certain human responses, some of which are learning responses, and it's quite advanced as an interface. The only interfaces that, no, I don't think there are any interfaces in BI that are particularly more advanced than that. If you're looking for more advanced interfaces, you have to go to game software, which are self-learning interfaces. And that's a kind of an interesting thing because, BI, if it's for anything, it's for people. And if it's for people, then the software should be structured to make it really easy to access and easy to make the things happen that you can make happen with the software. And it just isn't the case with a lot of BI software. No, because I would prefer enablement or something like that. There's the idea of democracy is about people having votes in order to determine an outcome. And I don't think that what we're talking about here is people having votes in order to determine an outcome. I think we're talking about people being enabled in order to be able to make best use of technical capabilities. Most of the things that I find is kind of curious, but most of the things that are happening in BI in terms of what the software actually does, have been solved problems for like 15 years or something. It's the actual interface that is not the solved problem. And people talk about the older BI products as being in one way or another clunky and very, very difficult to use. Well, it's not like they didn't provide you with the capability of presenting the data in the way that is presented in the more advanced and more recent products. They did provide you that capability, just weren't very usable. Well, there are a number of things you can point to. I haven't got an answer to this question, but there are a number of things you can point to. One of which is that we now have a much greater ability to actually access data and push data around. So a lot of the things that's being done with BI now couldn't be done before because we couldn't get the data. So, a number of revolutions have occurred, but one of the revolutions that occurred after about the year 2000 is that pretty much all of the software packages had to open a data room. They couldn't actually clamp it down and not even tell you what the metadata was. The data sources were opened up. Now it's started to become a market for data. So if you took a look at that particular dimension, that dimension is fairly dramatic in terms of the enablement that's created. and it's almost irrelevant to the software that can make use of it. You know, so that's a different thing. There's another thing that's got to do with when you have a business process, you have the technology that enables it, which might just be mechanical technology, it's not always digital technology, but the process and the technology that enables it, and the roles that people play. Well, what's happened in the past, certainly in the past 15 years, is the software has got more and more sophisticated to allow different particular roles in respect of the business process. And one of the things that I think is happening, but it hasn't happened in a big way right now, is the time that you want the BI information, the intelligence, is the time you make the decision. There isn't any other time that you want it. You don't, you know, if the information takes some digesting and you have to make the decision fast, maybe you want it earlier than the time you take the decision, but other times you want it at the time you take the decision. Well, we never built systems like that. We built transactional systems to do things, and then we gathered the data and put it in a data warehouse and then passed it out through BI tools so people could look at the past. And they're always driving in the rearview mirror. Well, now what's happening is it's getting more and more possible to actually drive in real time. You actually can actually look out at the world as it happens and start making various decisions. And that's, I think, a big change in BI. But when you actually get that change, I think you end up applying it more because it has more relevance to pretty much every business process you're doing. But you know, looking backwards, a manager needs to know. A manager needs to know that last week or so the sales were collapsing in a particular area of the country and so on and so forth. He needs to know that. But you know, when you've actually got it instrumented to a kind of real-time thing, then every person that's part of the company can probably profit from the information. So you've got more BI users, is the thing. You know, or more people likely to use BI. You know, because the other thing is, of course, one of the blocks to it is that it's so hard to use and therefore people don't use it. You know, and it's like there was always this, what I would call this old world, where the big BI tool was called Microsoft Excel. And that's what everybody used. And those people who weren't smart enough to make Excel behave like a BI tool never used it. Because they didn't have it. You know, they probably had Excel, but they didn't know how to do it. Well, now we're getting much more usable BI. All of that capability is suddenly spreading out to other people that never had a BI capability. And that's a part of the picture. But you still, like I say, it's a very complicated picture.